Do it again, do it again.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back once again to a brand new episode of The Other People. As always, I am your host, Mr. Jordan Royter. Joining me, as always, is my good friend, Andrew. Say hello. So, given the fact that the past couple of weeks we've been delving into a little bit of a Let's Play retrospective of the Legacy of Kain series, I've also kind of noticed that while we were doing a lot of that, we weren't really talking all that much about the series in itself. So I figured, why don't we just do an episode on it? Just talking about kind of the history, the story, the characters, and as much as we can. So, for starters, the Legacy of Kain series it's a tad complicated in its own history, namely in its development cycle of it. When the Legacy of Kain series was first started, it was initially started back in 1993 originally, and it was originally developed by Silicon Knights, who later went on to make Eternal Darkness for the GameCube Nintendo system. I think that may have been their last endeavor. I'm not entirely sure.
No, their last endeavor was Too Human for the Xbox 360.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It was, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Which was supposed to be a three-parter series, which never got started.
Yeah.
Well, it got started, but they never actually did the second game or the third game.
Yeah. It sounds like another game series that was supposed to start, and that was the Advent Rising game that was made for the Xbox.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, originally when this was in development, and this is another very funny sort of relation to it, when they were first making it, the game was originally supposed to be released for either the 3DO or for the Sega Saturn.
I could actually kind of see that.
And since neither one of those systems had really any lasting power, or really, any lasting relevance, I never really even knew anybody who had a 3DO system. Did you?
No.
Or even a Sega Saturn, for that matter.
I didn't. Nope.
Yeah. Well,
most everybody got a PlayStation.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, from what I understand about the 3DO, was that it was really expensive. But so anyway, they decided to hold off for about a couple of years, and then they released it for the PlayStation 1. Now, and I didn't get around to playing the original Blood Omen after, being introduced and playing Legacy of Kain's Soul Reaver, which was the spiritual successor to it. And well, for those who aren't familiar with our Let's Play retrospective on Blood Omen, it's a pretty standard. It's a very standard story. Character Kain that we're initially first introduced to is a human nobleman who's murdered and vows bloody vengeance and is resurrected. Then there's this whole complicated backstory that is kind of introduced in the first game, but it's not.
It's kind of something they kind of glossed over in the first game, and then just kind of it turns out kind of fleshed out in the later games.
Yeah, where it turns out, at the end of the game, oh, you were meant to be a disciple of the Balance Guardian. Okay, so there's this big, long backstory that we kind of need to go into before we go any further. The history of Nosgoth is that there are 9 pillars that are meant to be the foundation of the earth. And and each one of them has a guardian. I forget what the set elements there are. There's the Balance Guardian, the Guardian of the Mind, Guardian of Combat, Guardian of Nature, I believe. Guardian the Guardian of the Dead. I know that.
We're forgetting the Guardian of Time, which was Mobius.
There was Guardian of Time. There was Christ. There's like 3 more.
Yeah. Dude, I can't remember what all the Guardians are either.
Well, anyway. Basically, as part of the backstory, the Guardians become corrupt because there's this wave of deception when the Balance Guardian Ariel is murdered by a demon, and who is also murdered by one of her own. Spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
And so because Kain was meant to be the Balance Guardian, but now he is cursed and he's brought back from the dead as a vampire. And Ariel, the Balance Guardian, who is now a ghost, who is tied to the pillars themselves as part of the corruption. And the only way to be able to set everything right is to go to every one of the Guardians that are horribly corrupted and evil at this point and kill every single one of them and restore the pillars, and then set everything right.
And then, of course, at the end, you're pretty much given the choice of either killing yourself and just purifying the pillars, or what ultimately happens, Jameson's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Go fuck yourselves, which breaks the pillars.
Yeah. Well, and it's another thing, too, because like there are like a billion plot threads that are going on at the same time.
Yeah.
Kain simultaneously becomes the very last vampire in all of Nosgoth when Mobius, the time streamer, who is also the guardian of the Pillar of Time.
Mm-hmm.
He sets about this whole motion where he's the one who causes this character, what's his name? William the Just.
Mm-hmm.
Who
becomes William the Conqueror.
Yeah, well, in the game they call him the Nemesis, he commands this evil army, and they are going to set upon the land and destroy everything and blah, blah, blah. Well, turns out that's not actually who he was originally in the past, but Mobius went back in time and changed that and corrupted him by giving him the Soul Reaver, and Kain goes back in time to kill William before he ever becomes the Nemesis, but by doing that, it sets about this whole time paradox, and in which Kain becomes the sort of the evil center, like, oh, vampires, they're all evil, we should kill and eradicate every single one of them. And Mobius, he's the forefront of this mob.
Mm-hmm.
Really fucking complicated, really, when you think about it, especially when you start involving time travel.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of why time travel is something that should never really be involved when it's storytelling, because that just makes shit far more complicated than it has to be.
Yeah.
So anyway, Kain goes through all of that, and then he finds out at the very end that, oh, I'm the last pillar. I was meant to be the next in line as being the Balance Guardian.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's given this horrible choice, like either I sacrifice my life, but I'll be the last of the vampires, and then they will pretty much be extinct, but I'll be saving the world, or I can damn the rest of the world. And actually, there were 2 different endings for the game. If you kill yourself and you save the world, it's still kind of a shitty ending, because
isn't
Ariel,
she kind of like indifferent?
Yeah.
Ariel, she doesn't really have anything kind to say about you.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, she says, in life he was a petty nobleman, but on life, he sacrificed his life in which to save the world. Shades cast no shadows. It's like, did you just kind of backhand somewhat compliment me in... What the fuck was that?
You kind of, like, both insulted me and complimented me at the same fucking time, bitch. What the hell?
Yeah. And whereas what the game obviously wants you to choose is damnation, because when you do that, you get this voiceover of Kain saying that once I embraced my powers, I realized that Vorador was correct. We are gods, dark gods, and
it's all duty to spin the hood.
And which then later sets up the later sequels that were to come. Now, and there are a few other characters in Blood Omen that are set up that we need to talk about that are always reoccurring. Kain, obviously for starters, who starts off as our sort of anti-hero for Blood Omen, and then eventually becomes our villain into Soul Reaver, a little bit in Soul Reaver 2, and then he becomes a playable character and hero for Defiance. And we will talk a little bit about... we do have to talk a little bit about Blood Omen 2, but we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah.
And so the other characters, there was Ariel, who is the Balance Guardian, who she's essentially a spirit who's bound to the pillars for all of eternity until the pillars are restored. And well, let's talk a little bit about the voice cast too. Simon Templeman, who does the voice of Kain, who does a great job as the voice of Kain.
Oh yeah.
And pretty traditional of all people who do any amount of voice acting. He's done a lot of stuff. I mean, he's been in a lot of games. He was in the Uncharted series. He only played one character in the first Uncharted game, but they bring him back mainly for a lot of the multiplayer stuff. He was your lead villain, and then he appeared in a few of the Dead Space games and also a few of the Mass Effect games. He was also... I know he did a soldier voice for the Knights of the Old Republic game.
He also, I believe, did, shit, I can't think of his name, but he was, kind of this admiral that portrayed Car Fonassi in that game. He did his voice as well.
Oh, okay, cool. But yeah, he's been obviously all over the gaming universe. And then, of course, there was Tony J, who originally, for Blood Omen, did the voice for the Mortanius character, the Balance... Well, I keep on wanting to say Balance Guardian first.
Yeah, he was the Guardian of Time.
No, I mean, he was the Guardian of Death.
Oh, yeah, the one who actually brought back Kain. Yeah,
yes. He's very prominent all throughout the series, but his role changed. Because first he played Mortanius, and then later on for the Soul Reaver series, he played the Elder God.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he's done a shit ton of voice work, too. Namely, like kids' cartoons and such. Like, he did the voice of Shere Khan from the Jungle Book movies. And, well, yeah, I mean, just a shit ton of stuff. He was also the lead villain for that series, Reboot. You remember that show?
Yeah, I remember that show.
Well, and obviously... I mean, if you're so familiar with a actor's voice, you are going to recognize them immediately.
Yeah.
And here's something interesting that I didn't know. The voice actress for Ariel, Anna Gunn, she played... Okay, do you watch, or I should probably say, have you ever watched Breaking Bad, Andy?
No. I haven't. I probably should.
She played the character Skylar White on Breaking Bad, which I think was the lead character's wife. I think, which is pretty damn interesting. And like she's done she was also in Law and Order and Boston Legal and Deadwood, NYPD 2069. I'm not too sure about that one.
Okay.
She was also in 6 Feet Under, The DA, Miracles, Miss Watch, The Lion's Den. Just a shit ton of stuff. And just so you know, I mean, this wasn't just a one-time character. She was in the entire series.
Oh yeah.
I mean, her role was pretty short, but
kind of minor, really.
Yeah.
It was kind of minor, but...
Yeah, but she was there, and she was a pretty important character.
Yeah.
And then, well, I think for the rest of... Well, I mean, the next character that we can talk about is Vorador. Though Vorador's character was pretty brief, he was also a very important character in terms of story. He is kind of the one who talks to Kain about their kind and about what it is that they do, and then he does become a little bit more prominent in the Soul Reaver series, sort of. In fact, in Blood Omen, he's kind of the last vampire who's executed, and also, I mean, he for the opening of Blood Omen, you actually see him attacking a group of sorcerers. Now, yeah, I mean, as part of the story is not so well explained, you don't really know what the hell is going on. But then from some of the backstory that you hear very early on in the history of the Legacy of Kain series, there was this big vampire sort of war that was going on. There was a group called what were they called? The Old Knights.
Oh, shit.
What was the name?
It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't...
The Seraphan. That's it.
Yes. I'm glad one of us finally remembered.
They were these. They were a group of holy knights, and they were also being, I guess, led by the Guardians.
Mm-hmm.
And well, because this kind of went against the order, again, big, long fucking backstory that we'll get into a little bit more later. Vorador personally went and actually killed, I think, well, he claims that he killed like 6 of the members of the Guardians, though we only see him kill 4. Yeah. But still. And well, he is also the one who kind of talks to Kain and actually helps him out. Blah, blah, blah. Said actor is Paul Lakathor, if I'm pronouncing that properly, and I hope I am. And again, I mean, he appears like all throughout the Metal Gear series, or I mean, the Legacy of Kain series. But he was also
wrong series, Jordan.
What?
You almost said the wrong series there.
No, I know. Well, it's also because I'm looking at his IMDb page because he was also in the Metal Gear series.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, he's done a lot of television, and he's done a lot of voiceover work as well. And so, I mean, to get back again to a lot of the backstory of the history of everything that goes on, and like a lot more of that is explained in the later sequels and such. And I mean, at least they do a good job of actually explaining things a little bit more and going into a lot more of the history, which you think would be boring, but I mean, because they do such a good job about it, it's actually really interesting.
Yep.
And so that leads us into Soul Reaver, which was the game that I was introduced to. This game takes place about 1,000 years or so after the events of Blood Omen, where Kain basically has conquered all, and he has this ever-growing empire of vampires that he rules with 6 of his lieutenants, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think it was 6.
Yeah, and we're introduced to the character of Raziel, who is the firstborn of his lieutenants, as we're told in the beginning narration of the game. And as part more of the backstory that we're introduced to, that comes into maybe an hour or so into playing the game or so, we then learn that the 6 lieutenants that Kain has and created, that's including Raziel, Terrell, Dumas. Who are the others? Anyway, it would take me too long to try to remember. Each and every single one of them was originally in life, they were a Seraphan warrior. And so it's this dark and horrible, twisted revelation that Kain spawned former vampire hunters to be his most powerful lieutenants.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a joke of irony, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, as Kain put it, like in Soul Reaver 2, it's like, who better to serve me?
Yeah. Who better to serve me than those whose passion transcends all notions of good and evil? And, and really, I mean, the main story of Soul Reaver when you're first introduced to Raziel is that he's betrayed by his master and decided to be thrown into the pit of the abyss where he'll burn forever.
Mm-hmm.
And instead he finds himself at the bottom, and then he hears the voice of this old ancient being who seemingly brings him back to life and sort of tells him that, because of Kain and his parasitic empire, the world in itself is dying and practically beyond redemption, and there's no more balance. There's no wheel of fate for me to turn because there are no more souls, because they're just accursedly trapped in this husk that is the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want you to be sort of my Reaver of Souls, and upon that you can take your revenge upon Kain and every single one of your former brothers. And really, I mean, with all of the Legacy of Kain stories, they're all about revenge and redemption in some way and form. They also just happen to have a lot of twists and turns and dealings of fate and free will and such.
And lack thereof.
Yeah. And then, and it's actually rather interesting because, because once you go back to the world and then you go and you confront your brothers, each and every one of them has de-evolved into these gigantic, monstrous forms. Like your first brother, Melchiah, who we were talking about during the Let's Play, but we didn't really get to actually fight him. He's almost like this like.
He's basically a pile of moving flesh.
Yeah, he's almost like this gelatinous blob. And each one of them has these special abilities because of their deformations. Melchiah, he's able to phase through objects and such, like gates and such, or like steel bars and such. Mm-hmm. And then you have your brother Duma, who he hasn't really changed much. I mean, he just kind of became a giant brute.
Mm-hmm.
And then his power is kind of lame. Whenever he walks around an object, he'll release this sort of a corporeal snake that will wrap around and constrict them and I guess make them move, or something like that, which was kind of stupid, to be honest.
Yeah.
There was your brother Zephon. That's it. Who and him and his spawn, they're these vampire spiders, which is pretty goddamn creepy. Really?
Oh yeah. So I remember that's where I kept getting stuck in Soul Reaver.
Yeah. And he's kind of grown out of the side of this mountain. And so like half of his body is just pure rock. And he's this giant spider queen looking creature.
Yep.
And then there's your brother Rahab. And because of the vampire nature, they were originally horribly immune to water. But because of the long evolution of time, they developed an ability to actually resist water, and so they became these vampire fishmen.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also supposed to be your brother Terrell, but now, and this is kind of explained later on in the series, but I think really what the problem was that they kind of either they forgot about him or they didn't have the programming capability in order to put Terrell actually in the game.
Yeah.
But actually Terrell, he turns up in Defiance.
Yeah.
Which was the last game in the series. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And so anyway, as you go through the game, you eventually confront Kain, and then he drives you through this time portal, and then things are explained a little bit more in Soul Reaver 2.
Yeah.
And I never officially beat Soul Reaver. I came close, but I kept on getting stuck at this one particular last puzzle. And then I remember before Soul Reaver 2 came out, and then just for its anticipation, I remember I was really excited for this game. So much so that when we first played it, I remember you just hung out with me while we watched the opening cinematic of it, and really, I mean, all the opening cinematic it's kind of the last cinematic scene of Soul Reaver, which was the confrontation between Kain and Raziel. Only slightly edited and with better graphics, and you actually kind of see them fight each other for a little bit.
Yep.
And something I never really expressed, but something that is definitely worth noting, the writers for the Legacy of Kain series took a lot of note from Shakespeare.
Yeah, I noticed that myself.
Yeah. There's just so much, just very good dialogue. Just really good dialogue. It's very well written. And of course, I mean, it really helps that each one of the characters that is delivering this dialogue, it's done by professional voice actors, for one thing.
Yeah, it was one of the first games that actually hired actual voice actors rather than just community guys that they got off the street. Like, hey, want to be in a video game?
Okay. Wow, Raziel, you almost became a Raziel sandwich. No, thankfully it wasn't anything like that.
Yeah! To where it's kind of almost laughably bad.
Like, what the fuck is that? I destroyed a tyrant only to make one far worse.
Oh?
What was that? God damn it. Hold on. Okay, and so since we were talking about the Soul Reaver series, we have one more voice actor that we need to mention. That's Michael Bell, who was, of course, the voice for Raziel. And, of course, he's, I'm sure, very well known for doing all sorts of voices. He was, I know, several voices for the original Transformers series, and he did also, apparently recently, he was in Lightning Returns, Final Fantasy 13 Part 3, which really isn't too surprising. I mean, I know a lot of voice actors will do a lot of different voices. And so, anyway, so when Soul Reaver 2 came out, that was really when the graphics really seemed to get a lot more realistic. And I mean, what I really loved so much about Soul Reaver 2 was that everything looked a bit more realistic, and it had a more gothic feel to it in terms of its art style and the animation and everything.
You felt more like you were in an actual world.
Yeah.
Than you were in the previous games.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, it was a much bigger story. Well, I mean, it certainly felt like one. It felt like a much bigger and much more important story. There was a lot more revelations and such. Like, you learn a lot. Like, you learn a little bit more about your past and about who you were, more specifically as a human Seraphan. And then you're introduced...
And even renounce it at the end.
Yeah. And of course you meet one more very important character, and that is Janos Audrin, who's like the oldest living vampire, and he wasn't...
Isn't he like the 10th Guardian as well?
Yes, he was the Guardian of the Soul Reaver.
Yeah.
Well, he was the Guardian. He was also one of the people responsible for making the original physical version of the Soul Reaver. That, as part of the story, later becomes Kain's central weapon. And actually, that is one of the various weapons that you find in the original Blood Omen that Kain will use. And then, of course, is a reoccurring weapon in the entire series, and also has its own importance as well.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's a lot of different plot threads that go all throughout the game series. Yeah. And so, long story short, in Soul Reaver 2, you have these three other characters. You have the character of Mobius, who's a lot more prominent, mainly with the fact that he's the first character that you're introduced to in the very beginning of Soul Reaver 2.
Yeah. And he's a lot more evil, as I remember, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because in the original Blood Omen, where you first meet him, he's not very... Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to really nail down exactly who he is. More specifically, when you first meet him, where he's more like this old soothsayer who's there to kind of tell you like what you need to do and kind of where you need to go.
Yeah.
And then later on in the game, he becomes a villain.
Yeah.
And in Soul Reaver 2, he's still meant to guide you in a way, but he's also still incredibly manipulative as the master of time. Obviously, he's going to be. And
well, that and later in Defiance, you kind of find out he's actually working for the Elder God.
Well, hell, I mean, in Soul Reaver 2, he pretty much tells you that is who he worships.
Yeah.
And
we serve the same master.
Yes, the wheel of fate demands it. What did you say? The wheel of fate. The inexorable cycle of death and rebirth. We serve the same God, Raziel. Strike me down would be like striking down God's own attendant, and I don't think you have the guile to take that risk. Good God, I really have played and watched
you kind of got that memorized, don't you?
Well, it's such good shit, you know? I mean, it's so good. It's so good. I think my favorite scene in Soul Reaver 2 has to be your second or your third confrontation with Kain when you're at the mausoleum of William the Just. And, and Kain has his long monologue about fate and free will.
Mm-hmm.
About how he recollects about the choice that he made, how in his youth he foolishly went back in time and horribly altered history.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of does the same thing, well, not necessarily the same thing, but basically gives Raziel the choice. Basically telling him that, you know, you have nothing to fear from me. I mean, you're the one, you know, that I should be afraid of. Mm. And basically gives him this choice where you can kill me, but if you do so, you know, you'll fuck up like both of our fates. Or you can resist, and we can hopefully correct and change the way that things are meant to be for the better.
Mm-hmm.
And things kind of progress from there, where so a lot of revelations occur. Janos Audrin is introduced as this very prominent and important figure. He was mentioned in the original Blood Omen when you find his accursed heart, which
the heart of darkness,
which kind of becomes, to put it mildly, He's the Super Mario Brothers 1-up mushroom, basically.
Yeah.
Where, like, every time you die, he's basically your extra life.
Yep. Or you can even use it to heal yourself, too.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And so in Soul Reaver 2, Raziel kind of seeks him out because Janos supposedly can tell him everything that he needs to know about who he is and what he's meant to be.
Yeah.
And so when you do finally find him, he presents you with the original physical incarnation of the Soul Reaver. But before you can do so, you're interrupted by the Seraphan, who are trying to hunt down Janos. And you actually realize that it was your human self, along with your original brothers, who killed Janos and who actually rip out his heart and steal the Soul Reaver.
Yep.
And so you make it your mission to go back and kill every single one of those Seraphan, and of course, like, as all of this is going on, these hilarious every single one of these revelations is occurring to Raziel that, oh, so I'm the one who murdered every single one of these and then provided the original lieutenants that Kain would later raise as his vampire sons.
Yeah.
And then you have this great confrontation between your original human self and like, as Raziel takes the Soul Reaver and runs him through, he has this great bit of dialogue where all he says is, I renounce you. It's just so awesome. And then another revelation happens.
Yeah, basically the demon soul inside the Soul Reaver, Devour Soul, it's him!
Yeah. Suddenly the blade turns on you, where it's this moment of fate, where your own sword and your own soul, they both kind of turn on you and they begin devouring you.
Yeah.
And Raziel realizes, oh, that's right. The only reason why, when Kain originally wielded the Soul Reaver, why it couldn't destroy me was because it couldn't destroy itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was too much of a time paradox. And also, that was another plot point that we forgot to mention. In the original fight of Blood Omen between Kain and William, they both possessed physical versions of the Soul Reaver.
Yeah.
And so, and well, the only reason why Kain won the fight was because there was a huge time paradox. Because the both of them were meeting on the same plane, one of them could not exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, it was just this, oh, Jesus Christ.
Time paradox! Oh, my head!
Exploding!
My head!
You know, but still, I mean, they did it. I mean, they managed
they did it in a way to where, yeah, it's complicated, but it's not overly complicated.
It can be a little overly complicated if you think about it way too much.
Yeah.